Welcome to what I hope to be a pretty interesting hour and 15 minutes together. It's going to be an active session. We're going to be talking to each other quite a bit. And what we're really focused on is this notion of strategy, how a school can sort of move itself forward. And it's all through the lens of a journey metaphor that we're going to take. And we're going to also weave into this some exciting new research that NAIS has been doing around what's called jobs to be done and why parents hire our schools. And so that's going to be something we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about as well. My role is Chief Innovation Officer at NAIS. That role, you could argue, is like, what does that guy do? And like, what does that actually mean? And and is he just running around the country kind of looking at bright, shiny objects and visiting makerspaces? And the answer is no, in fact. My work primarily is around helping heads and boards create the strategy to move themselves forward, both creating a sustainable economic platform for the school, but also looking a lot at teaching and learning. But we're really thinking about some other big ideas. So what I'd like you to do in your first very brief, about 2 minutes, is at your table, I want you to just, for just a second, talk about, this is a very misunderstood word, and I want you to talk about what exactly, from your perspective, is innovation. What is innovation, right? Just take a couple minutes. There's no right answer to this. Just talk about it at your table. Introduce yourself to the people you're sitting with if you don't know them already, and just answer the question, what is innovation? All right, that gets you going. So a couple quick words that came up in your conversation to describe what innovation is. I'm looking for people to just call out some words. Anyone? Anticipatory. Nice. Yes, others. Departure. Departure from convention. All right. Yes. Disruptive. New. Uncomfortable. Questioning. Risk. Not status quo. Okay. We're going to use a lot of that today, but we're going to use a framework where we're going to say that innovation is a journey. Innovation fundamentally is a journey. I would argue, in fact, that innovation is a disposition, that it's a way of seeing the world, that it's a way of acting as a community, that it's a methodology for approaching how we solve problems and how we as schools make progress. And so as we think about it as a journey, let's sort of put that in context. So our journey begins in a place that I call Nowtown. Nowtown is your current reality. It is your school today. As I visit schools all over the country, it happens to be from McDonough, where I was for 18 years, but Nowtown is lovely. If we were to go to your school today and we were to walk around the campus, I can guarantee you I would probably come back to your office or to your classroom and I would say, man, this place is lovely. There are great kids, great teachers, great relationships, hopefully a nice campus. Lunch is probably pretty good. I'm feeling good. I love it. I love the place. Parents are happy at carpool. Generally speaking, it's lovely. At the same time, though, if we were to kind of go in and sit down and close the door, we'd start talking about some challenges. We'd start talking about some forces that are acting on our Nowtown. And so a lot of the work we do at NAIS is around what are the national forces acting on our industry Nowtown. And I'll tell you about some of them. This is one of my favorite graphs. It's from a trend book a few years ago, but I think it tells the story incredibly well. In 1983, if you were a family in the third income quintile, middle America, and you were in the middle of that quintile and you wanted to send one child to the average NAIS day school, it would require 17.9% of your income. Fast forward 30 years to 2013, 2014, and that same family, middle of the third income quintile, wants to send one child to the average NAIS day school, 47% of their income. We have lost the middle class. We've lost, based on our 8, 6, whatever percent tuition increases. If you look back over a longer period of time, we were growing at 6% per year for a very long time. And we lost the middle class. Now, we've somehow figured out, after 2008, how to cut 2% growth out of our average budgets. We've somehow figured out how to do it. I don't know that there's another 2% to cut unless we get into changing something more significant. But we did it. We actually made some changes. If we look at the NAIS 1,800 member schools, just from an enrollment lens, we see some schools are in high growth mode, adding kids, and we see some schools are in a high decline mode. And what's fascinating is we plotted these on a map. And what we expected to see was these colors would be more predominant in one market over another, right? We expected to see high growth markets and high decline markets. And while that was a little bit true, what was more interesting to us was that these distributed, if you zoomed in on a market, we saw a high growth school 5 miles from a high decline school. And we saw that all over the place. We started asking ourselves, what is it that makes that school high growth and that school high decline, and they're essentially in the same market? We started wondering about that. We also have been doing a lot of work through SSS on financial aid. And what we found was that in 2010, 2011, 30% of financial aid was going to families in the highest income quintile. The top 20% earners were receiving 30% of aid. And by 2015-16, that number grew to 42%. So what happened is that small grants are now much more prevalent in financial aid than large grants. And we're seeing the families that are making well over, in many markets, over 150, 175, 200, 225, 250 are applying for and qualifying for financial aid. We're also seeing a shift in applications. From the most recent trend book, we're seeing that upper school applications across the country are generally up, and lower school applications are generally down. The notion of a softening K-4 experience is definitely something we're seeing across the country. So as you think about, because this is just some of the national trends, but as you think about your own Nowtown, your own reality, your own forces that are acting on your school, understanding your Nowtown is critical to making progress as a school. So what I'd like you to do for a second is just think about these challenges, struggles, concerns, and priorities, almost like a SWOT. I'm only going to give you like 3 minutes for this, so you can't do it all of it. But just wonder with someone around you about what are the forces when you think about your Nowtown and you think about the forces that are acting on it, what are they for you? What are those things that you need to be aware of? Just take a couple minutes and chat on that. Okay, let's come back together. So this is your first homework assignment. To go off and get the data you need to really understand your Nowtown. So job one is like, where are we? And there's two sides to that coin. Number one is, what are we doing that we would never want to lose? What makes us special? What's that unique element of Nowtown that we would never want to lose? And then, what are those things that we need to pay attention to? What are the forces that are acting on our Nowtown that we better pay attention to? And if there's things we don't know, there's data or information we need, then let's go get it so that we have a clear understanding of where we are. So the challenge that we're facing as we think about strategy, and a lot of the work that we're doing at NAIS, is how do we help schools get beyond lovely? right? You don't get rid of your loveliness. Your loveliness is so awesome. You show up on campus, I just love it. But we know we got to get beyond lovely. We know that the current lovely is not going to keep us going far into the future. There are forces acting on us that we have to be aware of. And so the question we've been asking in the strategy lab at NAIS is, how do we do it? How do we get beyond lovely? We believe, after tons of interviews with schools, talking to tons of different people who are, I think, on the move and making progress, is we think the way you do it is you become a community of mountain climbers. That it is about disposition. It is about the ability to evolve. It's about the sense that a community is on the move. That you have some momentum. In a 2017 article in Independent School Magazine, John Gula wrote a great article, and one of the things he talked about was that from his visiting over 300 schools, that schools fall into 3 categories. I call them 3 buckets. And what John said in that article is that bucket 1 schools are fine. Bucket 1 schools have 20 years at least where they don't really need to worry. They've got super strong brand, super strong budget, great leadership, great endowment. Everything is good. Super strong market. More kids than they know what to do with. That's a bucket 1 school. And so if you're sitting here going, I wonder if we're bucket 1. The answer is no. If you have to ask, are we bucket 1? That by its very definition makes you not bucket 1. So the second 2 buckets, bucket 2 and bucket 3. Bucket 2 schools are schools that get it. Bucket 2 schools are schools that understand the imperative, they understand this moment, they are on the move, and they're ready to go. And bucket 3 schools are schools that have yet to understand that. They're stuck in Nowtown. As someone said to me the other day, what's to the left of Nowtown, right? Meaning, what's even before that understanding? That's bucket 3. And one of the hard questions we have to ask ourselves in our schools is, are we in fact as a community on the move? Or are we stuck? Right? So for us, being a community of mountain climbers is that it's a community of, in the school that has the potential and the capacity to move, to innovate, to evolve. So how do you do it? Well, all of our interviews and all of our work with schools and all of our deconstructing schools that are on the move and how they've done it has led to this mountain analogy, this mountain framework for thinking. And it's evolved. If anyone's ever seen me do the mountain stuff before, it's actually changed quite a bit over the last year because we've been doing so many more interviews and so much more conversation. But here's what we find. Find step 1 is understand your Nowtown. Understand your enrollment trends, your financial trends, advancement, all the data, market research. You've got to understand all that stuff about you. And once you have that clear understanding of Nowtown and you've articulated your imperative to move, the next step is what we call your first ascent. And your first ascent is a deliberate process with the board and with the head and with the leadership team to strive for clarity. The first ascent is the deliberate process of getting deep understanding and clarity about, as a community, why do we exist? To quote Jim Collins, if we as a school were to disappear off the face of the earth tomorrow, what irreplaceable thing will be lost to the world forever? If we were to disappear off the face of the earth tomorrow, what irreplaceable thing will be lost to the world forever? That notion of that clarity, starting to get to truly understanding, does our mission statement serve us the way we need it to? Do we understand? Is there consensus among the board? Do we understand, as the parent community and the students that we serve, really well? One school told me about a thing they did recently where they put up pictures of all the graduates. 3 weeks after graduation, they put up pictures of all the graduates. And they had the leadership team get together and they looked at the wall and they said, they kind of moved kids around, and they said, who are the kids that we served incredibly well, who had a transformative experience in our school? And who were the kids maybe we didn't serve as well, or maybe didn't have quite the transformative experience? And do we notice any characteristics or similarities? Is there anything that these kids really have in common and other than these kids? Right? One experience to get to that notion of who it is that we serve really well. Once you've done that work, as you've done that work, you eventually emerge into what we call your base camp. And your base camp is when you believe you have that shared consensus about why we exist. Who do we really serve? What are we really about? What is our mission, right? This is about, base camp is about who we are as a community. It's not necessarily about where we're going, but it's about who we are. And what we found is if you don't have a stable base camp, if you do what I call fast hiking through base camp, where essentially what you do is you just kind of like, woo-doo-doo, yep, we got it, we know what our mission is, and we just keep on going. When you get to descent in a little while, it's going to get really cold, and it's going to get really hard. So creating and understanding and having a stable base camp is a very important part, and your stable base camp has got to be informed with your now-town reality, right? You've got to use that information you understand about yourself to say, okay, who are we and what is it that we really believe is important? And once you have that, now you understand what you might be that's unique in the world. And this is who we really serve well. Then what you do is you begin prototyping. And prototyping is about small, deliberate experiments that help us as a community become the best in the world at doing those things, at living into our base camp. If this is who we are, then man, what can we go do? What are some trial and error things we can do to have people better understand that, to better do that with kids, to have better clarity on that work? What does that look like? How can we live into that? What is our reality? What is that, these experiments? It's not this huge plan. It's not we're going to change everything. It's not a 5-year strategic plan. This is about prototyping. It's about rapid iteration. It's about trial and error. It's about being willing to fail on some things. But the difference here is that in most cases, what I see when I visit schools that are innovating is that the innovation is great. People are lit up. There's a lot of momentum, but it's random. I can't tell you what it's pointing at. I can't find a thread that connects the innovation. I can't tie it back to a base camp. I can't tell you how many strategic plans I read, and there's no clarity of base camp in the strategic plan. Just like a mission statement. I could do a find and replace on one school's name, put another school's name, best in the world faculty, facilities for the 21st century, the most relevant academic program that's tied to the job skills of tomorrow, right? Financial resources to ensure we can navigate the tumultuous future, right? Like, that's it. There's no clarity in that for me, no idea of where we're going. What the prototyping gives way to is the next step, which is the summit. The summit is your vision. The summit is a common commitment to not who we are, but where are we going? If we look out 1, 2, 5, 7, 10 years, where do we want to be as a community? To go back to Jim Collins, this is your BHAG. This is your big, hairy, audacious goal. This is what we want to do, right? This is your vision for what you're going to do to truly live into your base camp values and your base camp articulation of clarity. So once you have that, once you say, this is for me where now we've got a vision. Now we know what we want to do. Now we want to build a strategic plan that's all about how we're going to do that. So once you've got your vision, this is the school we want to be, now we need a plan to help us be it, to help us do it, to turn the idea of our vision into our identity. The move from who we want to be to who we actually are. And that process we call the descent. And the descent is the deliberate articulation of how we're going to live into a common vision that's shared across the whole school and is incredibly well communicated. That vision, how we do it, is the descent. And so this is more about project management, about setting clear goals, about building out real teams, about creating some experiments, but now this is about actually making it happen. This is where we're changing the schedule. This is where we're building a new building. So often, I can't tell you how many times I've talked about this, and people come up to me and say, we've got our summit. And I say, yeah, what is it? It's a new STEM building, right? It's not. A STEM building is not a summit idea. It feels like a summit because it eats up so much time and energy and resources and planning and building and everything else. From the effort level, it feels like a summit, but it's not a compelling vision. A building is not a vision. Now, you may need a building in your descent to live into that vision you have, but this is why it's so important. If you know anybody who knows anything about mountain climbing, what they'll often tell you is that in mountain climbing, people die coming down the mountain, not going up. And I've found the same thing to be true in schools that I've talked to and worked with this innovation. The reason descent is shown as down is because it's hard work. And the most consistent reality that I've seen recently is that if you go into descent without a stable base camp, the cold winds are going to really get you. It's dark. You've been hiking since 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't have any granola bars left. Your headlamp battery is fading, right? Schools that go into making schedule changes, dropping AP, trying to move some major program around, those are all descent ideas. If you do that without a clear communicated vision that's common and shared, and without common base camp values, you're really going to be in trouble, right? That's where the challenge comes in. And so once you've emerged through descent, then you end up in what I call Nowtown 2. Nowtown 2 is where we've done a lot. We've made a ton of progress. And the tendency of the school now is to take a break, a well-deserved break, to set up our tents, to kind of gather around a fire and share a little bit. But the tendency is to start ordering in lumber and start building a new Nowtown. The tendency often is to go back to status quo. And what I've seen in schools that have successfully gone through this process is that what actually happens as they're tempted to build a new Nowtown, what actually happens is instead the second summit emerges. That the evolution of an idea comes through. One of my favorite examples is Woodside Priory, a school in California, Palo Alto, founded by Benedictine monks. And one of the things that Priory believed in, their summit idea, based in their very clear values, their summit idea many years ago was balance. How do we help our students live lives of balance in the middle of Palo Alto? Right? There's a challenge. They were proud about it. If you walked onto the campus, they had those posts, those like signposts, and what they said was balance, balance, balance. They were willing to have a family who was not interested in balance but was interested in achievement. They were willing to say, we're not the school for you, right? As they went through this process and they started really asking themselves, one of the things, their second summit idea was to build beyond balance and to build for a meaningful life. And for them, a meaningful life is more than balance. Balance is part of it, but not all of it. And so now their second summit is the evolution of their idea. It's not jettisoning it. It's not reimagining themselves. It's still based very much in their base camp values. But now they're saying, what does it look like for us to build a program that is not just about balance, but it's about a much larger idea of a meaningful life? You see what I'm saying? Now they're on their way. They're journeying again, right? They've got their pack on and they're moving. That's the key. The key element for me is that this, as I said before, innovation is a disposition. It's a way your community behaves. It is not a thing. It's not a stopgap. It's not something you do once. And it's not something you get fatigued by. It's something you get invigorated by. Right? It is about a journey, but it's about a journey aligned to clarity, to who you want to be and where you are. So that is very much the journey elements we've seen. What I'd like you to do, if you haven't already done it in your head, is think for a minute, where are you now? If your school was to plant your flag to say where you are, where are you? Are you stuck in Nowtown, where you don't really have that deep clarity and you don't really understand where you are and what the forces are that are acting on you, and that's some work you need to do? Do you feel that you've got a common shared base camp? Would you feel that people throughout the community have a clear understanding of who you are and why you exist and how you're unique and who you serve? Do you feel that that's leading you now to trying some things out, trying things deliberately that are aligned to who you are and being better at that? Do you think you have that common vision that people are excited about? Are you in the process of implementing on a plan to enact that vision? Or are you all the way out second summiting and evolving your vision going forward? Where's the community on this right now? Think on that and then talk amongst your table about the notion of where's your flag if you were to plant it somewhere on the journey. Go ahead. All right, come on back. Let's continue to hike together a little bit. So let's review briefly what we've covered. First is you got to understand your Nowtown. You got to understand where you are, what you got, what do you want to keep, what would you never want to lose. As you start to hike, what would you put in your pack that you would never lose from the school? But you can't carry the whole Nowtown house up the mountain with you. So you got to be willing to say, what's those things we would never lose, and what are the things we're willing to change as you begin your journey? And as you begin that journey, the first step is coming to clarity, truly understanding who it is you serve and why you exist. So what we're doing at NAIS and the strategy lab work that I'm leading, and I have a great team working on it, is we're saying we're going to build tools and frameworks that schools can use all the way across the mountain journey. Insights and ideas that you can use to help you make progress along the entire journey. And the first one for us is understanding that first ascent. Understanding who is it that you serve? Why do you really exist? What is it about that? And one way we decided to do that was to look at from what I call moon back to earth. To change our view. In schools, we often make up programs and make up things we want to do, and then we go out and tell families about them. And the fact that they respond to what we're doing is kind of just dumb luck. And so what we decided to do was to turn our perspective, to look at our schools through the eyes of a parent, to say, what is it that they actually expect from us? What's their expectation? Why are they hiring us in the first place? So we partnered with a firm in Detroit that worked with Clayton Christensen at Harvard Business School and developed a methodology called Jobs to be Done. And we've been in this tank for the last year doing this research. And jobs theory is fundamentally based in something called the forces of progress. It's based in the idea that when someone makes a switch from one thing in their life to another thing in their life, when they make that switch, when they buy a different car, when they move their house, when they stop eating Milky Way and they start eating Snickers, right? When they use the Swiffer for the first time in their house. Each of those things, you make a switch. And when you make a switch because you're looking to make progress in your life. That's why we switch. We don't use the Swiffer because we're a 22-year-old female who went to college. Persona-based thinking doesn't work in jobs. I choose to use a Swiffer because I'm trying to make progress. And those progress is based on the forces. There's push forces, something about my current condition has to change. There's pull forces, something about the new solution is incredibly attractive to me. And on the other side, there's anxiety, the things that are holding me back, the things I worry about, and there's habits, things in my life that I'm just doing that, at the end of the day, I probably don't need to change. So I've said this many times before, I am not wearing a watch. Now, you need to understand, I would love to be wearing a watch right now. In fact, I have tried on the Apple Watch probably 6 times in Apple stores. And I look at it, and there's all kinds of pulls for me. One of them is the fact that I don't have a watch on right now, so I have no idea what time it is, and that's kind of driving me crazy. The other is that I'm very pulled to some of the features. Tracks my heart rate. I don't have to carry my dumb iPhone with me when I run every day, right? It tracks all my steps, not just the ones when my phone is in my pocket. Like there's all these, I get texts on it, right? There's all these things that are pulling me toward it. And there's a strong push as well. And that drives me into the Apple store. I was just in Charleston yesterday after I did a run. I walked past an Apple store and I almost walked in and tried it on yet again. But then there's the other side. Then there's the anxiety. And for me, the greatest anxiety is my lovely wife. And my lovely wife has said, that's the dumbest idea I have ever heard you talk about. She said, in fact, you walk in the house with one of those things on your wrist, and we're going to have a serious problem. She's like, I don't want to be sitting at the dinner table and have you looking at your wrist because someone texted you. She said, we got to break it away. We got to get the phone away. That's just your phone with you all the time. That's going to drive me freaking crazy. She said, no, like that, I'm against it. Now, is it my decision? Can I buy a watch? Sure. I've been in the store 6 times. I've almost done it. And then the anxiety takes over. And I'm like, and then I'm like, you know what? I run with my phone in my hand all the time. I've gotten used to it. I've gotten used to living without a watch. It's not that bad. So the habit stops me. And at this moment, the sum of anxiety plus habit is greater than the sum of push and pull. And when the sum of anxiety and habit is greater than the sum of push and pull, you do not have a switch. Right? You do not have a switch. So let's apply jobs to schools. We've done a ton of interviews, and this is about interviews. This is not surveying people on an online forum. This is about deep interviews with parents. And we've engaged in a bunch of them. And what we found was that parents, frankly, are in 4 jobs. They hire independent schools for one of 4 reasons. Job 1 says, help me help my child overcome obstacles. Job 1 families, there's something in their current circumstance that is not working. The current school model does not work. It could be that my child has a learning difference. It could be that my child's being bullied. It could be that the social environment of that school doesn't work for my child. It could be a host of different things. But I have got to get out of where I am. I've got to make a change to something new. And I'm looking at you, I'm hiring you as a school to help me make progress on the situation that I need to address with my child. This family sitting in the admissions office doesn't care about how many AP courses you offer. This family doesn't care about how many kids went to Ivy League colleges. This family wants to know that you, as a school, are going to be able to help them address the problem they have with their child. That's job 1. Job 2, help me fulfill my child's potential in a values-aligned community. Job 2 families generally say, the world is a big, complicated place. There's a lot of forces acting on my child. There's a lot of forces acting on my family. I want to take this big, complicated world, and I want to make it small, and I want to make it safe, and I want it to be a place where my child can realize their potential. If I were to give job 2 a name, it would be the greenhouse job. You take my good kid, everything's fine, put him in a safe, warm environment, nestled where they can grow and develop and realize their potential. I don't really know where they're headed. I don't really know what they're going to do. I just want them to do everything they're capable of. I want them to live into their potential in a community that also we agree with as a family. We're in line with this community. That could be a single gender school, but not always. It could be a boarding school because we believe in that premise. It could be a religiously affiliated school, certainly. There's common values shared across the school. But that's job 2. Job 3 says, help me develop a well-rounded person who will impact the world. Job 3 families say, you know what, at the end of the day, I care more about who my child is than what they know or how they do on test scores. This family says, I actually want you to expose my child to everything. For me, my child being with a diverse group of students, doing diverse work, doing lots of service, developing the whole child and the whole person, it's not about their next step. It's about who they're going to become. This is a transformative job. This is a job that says, I'm hiring you as a school to make my child, to partner with me to make my child into a really good human being. That's what I expect the school to do. Yeah, and along the way, I want them to realize their potential and so on. But for me, this is about realization. This is about who am I going to be. This is social emotional. This is experiential. This is take my little world and make it bigger. Open my child up to things I can't do alone as a family, right? And then job 4 says, help me realize my very specific plan for my very talented child. Job 4 families have talented kids, and they're hiring the school through a transaction to say, I know what I want my next step to be, and I think hiring you gives me a better chance to achieve that step than not hiring you. This is transactional. There's an implicit contract. I hire you, you deliver on the goods for my talented child. I look at my child and I think, you know what? He might actually be able to play D1 soccer. Like, I can imagine him playing D1 soccer. And I know that your school has put more kids in D1 soccer programs than the school down the street. So that's why I'm here. Or I think my child might just be able to get into X college. It's going to be a stretch. It's a little window, but I think, and I'm expecting you to help me squeeze through that little window, right? The thing about job 4 is I have a plan. I know where we're headed. I know what it's about, and my child's pretty talented, and I'm hiring you to help me get there. So it's interesting. Families do different kinds of, when we were talking to them about, like, how did you find the school and how did you do the research? And there's a very specific interview process. One of the things we found was job 4 families don't read the website. Job 4 families don't actually care that much about open house. Job 4 families build spreadsheets. And they look at college matriculation lists and they type them all out and they look at which school has a greater, out to the 3rd decimal point, has a greater likelihood of putting their kid into one school or another. That's one example, right? It's about where's my best chance of delivering on my plan. Not bad people at all. People who want the best for their kids. They're just seeing through a different lens. Important thing to also understand about jobs research is that the job is not a characteristic of the person. The job is a description of the context someone's in and the progress they're trying to make. So for example, I have 4 children. My 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, are very different kids. And for each of my kids, while I was going through the admissions process, I was in a different job. My son Sam has distinct learning needs. I am a job 1 father for Sam. When we were looking at schools for him, I could care less how they taught math. I could care less about all these other things. I wanted a school, Sam happens to be on the autism spectrum, I wanted a school that was going to be able to develop his social skills, and it was going to work with me as a father and was going to hug him when he got out of the car. That's all I want for Sam. Ben, on the other hand, is a completely different ballgame. Ben has distinct talents. I am a job 4 father when it comes to Ben. I wanted to make sure that a school could meet his real needs and could exploit and to develop his incredible talents and could give him opportunities to take the things he's really good at and get way better at them. Very different mindset. For Abby, who I think is my social person, I am a job 3 dad for Abby. As we're looking at colleges right now, she's looking at job 3 colleges. She's looking to go somewhere where she can find a way to impact the world and make it a better place, right? And so I am a job 3 dad when it comes to Abby and how I advocate for her. And so that's the notion, is that, and jobs describes where I am when I make the decision. What job am I in at the moment? Why am I hiring? What expectation do I have? Now for me, there's probably a little bit of 4 in me for all my kids. Right? We all have a little bit of 4 in us. We all have a bit of a plan, and we all kind of would love to see it come to fruition. But what Jobs says is, what force, what context am I in that most defines what decision I make to enroll? When I'm at the moment of switching from my current school to a new school, what forces push me over the top? And what we find when we interview is, while there might be trace elements of many jobs in someone through an interview, the clarity, when you do the pushes and pulls and anxieties and habits, one job clearly emerges for someone, generally speaking. And over time, people could change, certainly. You could come in as a job 2 family, and as your child starts to approach 8th grade and your secondary school placement is happening, or you start to approach 12th grade, you might become a job 4 family, right? Because as a switch starts becoming apparent, now there's new forces acting on me because I need to make another switch. And when that switch happens, I'm in a new context. And that new context might redefine my job. Remember, it's not baked into my DNA what job I'm in, right? The notion of jobs theory is that these jobs exist in the world. These jobs are independent of people. And the question is, how are we as a school going to do, enact, serve these jobs? So your next conversation at your table is, which of these jobs does your school serve or do best? And is there one job in particular that maybe you don't do so well? Because the key is, this is where this notion of we need to stop being all things to all people is something I've heard for years in independent schools. And I'd always be like, yeah, we need to stop being all things, all people. I never understood what that actually meant. What jobs theory says is, when you're trying to be all things, all people, you're trying to do those 4 jobs equally well. That is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to do each of those, to meet the expectations of all 4 of those parents equally well. So one of the things to think about is, if we were going to put our energy into a job or 2 jobs, where would it be? Talk about that at your tables a little bit. Okay, let's come back. I know that was nowhere near enough time to talk about jobs. So now you've got 2 homework assignments. Well, more than that. You've got 3 or 4 or something. You've got one is, what's our now town? What are the forces acting on us that we need to take advantage of and we need to think about? Number 2 is, you need to understand, as you start that ascent, you start really looking at defining your base camp and your understanding of who you are. One lens you need to look through to help you define your base camp is, what jobs do we serve really well? Right? What is it that where are we really working very well? That's part of understanding your base camp, is understanding your jobs. Once you understand your jobs, you start prototyping. You say, man, we are a really good job 2 school. Then you say, well, then what does job 2 really look like, and how might we do little experiments to get better at being job 2? Now, we are just scratching the surface of jobs in this. There's a lot more behind what job 2 is and what job 3 is and what job 4 is. And once you really understand that, that really helps you to develop prototypes. and helps you think about how you can move forward. And then once you understand those prototypes, your vision will emerge, your big idea, the big work you want to do as a school, and then you got to implement that and move forward. So another way to look at jobs, another context that I think is really interesting that I want to end with today, is to truly understand how different a job 1 family is from a job 4 family or a job 3 family, right? So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use something called the Kano Model. Kano Model was developed in Japan. It's a way of looking at products and services, and basically what it suggests, it's a way of looking at how happy people are with your school. The y-axis is from very unhappy to where they fire you, to extremely happy where they're talking about you all the time. And then the x-axis is how well you deliver on an attribute, something you do in the school. Something schools do well, you know, teaching math is an attribute. If you do it incredibly well, how happy are people going to be? And what the Kano model suggests is that there are 3 different ways of looking at any attribute of your product or service or school. Number 1 is what's called basic quality. Basic quality is your table stakes. Basic quality is just what people expect. If we were to flip this and put it in the automotive context, basic quality is your brakes. They just better work. If your brakes don't work, you're going to get fired, right? If they work incredibly well, nobody cares. No one's going to talk about them, right? I push on the brake, it stops. When you go, you're not going to see a Chevy commercial where they say, we've got amazing brakes, because no one cares. It's basic quality. If I'm buying a new car, I expect the brakes to work. What is basic quality in our schools? One of the things that I've seen through all the interviews that we've done is, you know what basic quality is? Great teachers. When people are paying the kind of tuitions we're charging, great teachers is basic quality. They just expect it. You're charging $20,000 a year, of course you have great teachers. And when you ask them, what do great teachers mean? People can talk about them about as well as they can talk about their brakes on their car. I don't know, the school's just got great teachers. Right? Why'd you hire the school? They've got great teachers. No one knows what that really means often when they talk about it in this context. But if you don't have great teachers, if the perception is that your teachers are not great for whatever reason, you will get fired, and you will get fired very fast. That's why great teachers is basic quality. The second attribute, or characteristics of attributes, is what are called performance attributes. Performance is about what you do. If you do it really poorly, you will get fired. But if you do it really well, it may be the reason people hire you. People will be very happy if you do it really well. This is a place worth investing in. This is an attribute of your program that's worth doing really, really well. Example in cars, miles per gallon. Do it horribly, no one's going to hire your car. Do it incredibly well, might be the reason that people are going to hire you. They're very happy with the car. In schools, I would argue that a performance attribute in many of our schools is how well our teachers know our students. As a school, how well do you know my child personally, individually, and what evidence can I see of how well you know my child? That's a performance attribute. The better you do that as a school, it's going to have major impact, not only on your mission and doing what's right for kids, but on how people perceive you. It's a performance attribute. It's one that you want to be investing in. And then exciters, the last attribute, are things that if you do them very poorly, it doesn't matter because no one knew they existed in the first place. And if you deliver on them really well, people are going to be happy. So an example of an exciter in the car world is a heated steering wheel. Many of you may not even know that some cars have heated steering wheels. But if you live in Minnesota and you're about to buy a car and you're sitting in the GM dealership, the person's going to say to you, oh, by the way, That steering wheel heats up. And you're going to say, what? Steering wheel heats up? Oh yeah, you come out in the morning, you start the car with a remote start, you get in the car and the steering wheel is going to be warm. And you go, no. Then you get in your car and you're like, how could I not buy the car with a heated steering wheel? But you'll never see an advertisement for heated steering wheels. So why? Because once they start advertising heated steering wheels aren't exciters anymore. Now they become performance, and then very quickly they become basic quality. That there's downward pressure on features. Climbing walls in colleges started out as exciters, then became performance. The bigger the climbing wall, the better. And now what are they? Basic quality. Bluetooth integration in your car was an exciter, performance, and now it's basic quality. So what are the exciters in your school? They're those magic little things that you see, that you feel, that are unique, the things you do that no one else does. At McDonough, where I was for 18 years, we had a farm. The school had an 800-acre campus. We had this cool farm. Kids would do all kinds of stuff out there, chickens, goats, barns, hay rides. And we had some stuff on the website, but not much. And when you were on the kindergarten tour, you walked into the kindergarten. And when you walked into the kindergarten, right by the front door was this great black wooden cubbies. And inside the cubbies were all these pairs of little orange rubber boots. And parents would say when they walked in, and they looked adorable. And parents would say, what is up with the boots? And we'd say, oh, yeah, did we tell you we have a farm? And we'd take the kids out, and they put their boots on, and we go out and jump on a hayride, and we roll out to the farm, and then we plant pumpkins. And when the pumpkins are ready, we go harvest them on pumpkin harvest day. Then we come into the kitchen that's in the lower school, and we actually have to work with the kids, and we bake fresh pumpkin pies. We put them in wagons, and we drag them around the school, and we take them to the headmaster, take them to the lower school head, take them to the upper school kids, and we deliver pumpkin pies all over campus as a kindergarten. And the parents look and go, what? And they get in their car and they say, how can we not send our kid to the school where they have sheep and goats and pumpkins and wagons? Like, of course we're going to do that. But you're not going to see a picture of that cubbyhole on the website. It's a secret little thing about the school, something we do really well, but it's our little secret sauce. That's your exciters. So the question is, where do you invest? Well, if your basic quality is not good enough, you have to invest there. Because if that's bad, you're getting fired. Once your basic, so you better know what your basic quality is. And the thing is that people don't talk about it. When people fire a school and you ask them why they fired it, they actually don't really even talk about basic quality. It's sort of like so deep that they don't even recognize that's it, but that's why they're firing you. Then you invest in performance. You know what your performance characteristics are, your attributes, and you get really, really good at those. And then hopefully you'll have a couple exciters along the way, right? But be careful where you invest. One school I was talking to recently was about to spend $20 million on a new dining hall. Now lunch, what do you think lunch is? Basic. Basic quality, right? Like a decent lunch, check. Is it worth investing $20 million in a new dining hall? Not because you're trying to improve the quality of lunch, because that's a basic attribute. You don't invest $20 million to improve the quality of lunch. Now, if there's something else you're trying to do with that dining hall that's more of a performance thing, that might be something different. But build to what you're trying to go to, right? Understand what its impact is. The reason I share this is because context is everything. Meaning, think about what basic quality is for a job 4 family. Think about what performance is for a family that's in job 4. If you're in job 4 and you want this school, you're hiring this school to deliver on a specific next step for your talented child, what you're going to consider to be performance is going to be, in the case of academics, more AP classes, more opportunities, classes in neuroscience, all kinds of that stuff. If you're a job 1 family, performance is about how much accessibility is there potentially to maybe a learning specialist? How much individual attention is my child going to get? Is there a teacher sitting at the table at lunch to make sure the kids aren't mean to each other? You know, these are things that job 1 family is going to look at as performance. The challenge we have when we try to do all 4 jobs is we try to invest in performance indicators for all 4 jobs. They're very different. It gets very expensive to do that, right? You're trying to get enough learning specialists to keep all the job 1 families happy, and you're trying to get enough neuroscience teachers to keep all the job 4 families happy. That's a really expensive thing to do. And oh, by the way, you've got a bunch of job 1 soccer parents, so we're trying to build a turf field as well to keep them happy, right? This is the challenge, is the context through which you look through Kano, through the jobs, pulled back to who you are as a school is incredibly important. Because where we invest, we have to be incredibly strategic on what it is that we're thinking about. So, that was a lot of content in an hour and 5 minutes. So, I'm sure there are some questions. I've been very strategic about not taking any questions up to this point, but I'm sure you must have some. So what do you want to know? How can I help you think through some of this stuff some more? Any burning questions? Yes?
How would you go about, if you wanted to start this conversation with your community, how would you do that?
That's a great question. So the first thing I would do is, I don't know that I would necessarily try to tell the whole mountain story and use Nowtown and so on. The first, what I would do is I'd come back and say, A, if I were the head of school, A, what data do I need to know and do we need to know that we're sharing about our current reality? Right, that's market data, admissions, et cetera. That'd be the first thing. What is our reality? The next thing I'd be working on is, what is our real clarity around who we are and who we serve, right? And if I have a minute, I'll show you an example of that. And then the next piece for me would be, how might we prototype? How might we be doing experiments, deliberate experiments to get better at that? Those would be 3 or 4 questions. And then I would also be looking at when parents hire us as a school, what jobs are most of our parents in? Do we have a predominance of one job over another in our school? Are we a job 4 school in our community, or is there a school down the street that actually is doing job 4? You know, is there another school in the community that's doing job 1? What jobs do we do? What jobs does our competition do? I'd be asking those questions and trying to get the clarity on that. And then I would be starting to think about how I prototype in search of a vision. So I know that probably doesn't answer your question, but it's specific things I would be doing with my leadership team to help me do that. And then I'd be trying to communicate this with my board and about how we're looking at direction. Ultimately, this work for me is a way of thinking strategically about where you go. This is about strategy. This is about setting our direction based in clarity, differentiated vision, clear planning for execution. That's the other thing, is what do I need? Once I have that vision, what do I need to make it reality? And don't undersell what that is. Don't undersell how much it's going to cost to really live into that vision, and go raise the money you need to raise and have the board be supportive. But those would be some of the key things that I would be doing, because ultimately this is a strategic thinking framework. The other key piece is, like I said earlier, it never ends. Right? This is about a disposition of how we behave as a community and how we're always in evolution. It's not a one-time gig. We're always evaluating our base camp. We're always thinking about what our vision is. We're always prototyping and we're always implementing. Right? Other questions? Yes. Go ahead.
So when you're looking at each movement, one of the things that you said is make sure that you've got consensus, make sure that everybody's on board. So, and I think we all know that everybody's on board to the shifting.
Right. It's a shifting part.
It's a shifting thing. What are some indicators that you can look for to say, okay, we're ready, like we've gotten our base camp firm, now we're really ready to do this event?
So one of the things we went through a long process of this at McDonough, right, where it took us 4 years to really get from Nowtown and understanding to really get to what I would call our base camp around the academic program. And we invented something called the Life Ready Academic Plan. And it took a while to get to that clarity. It was what I called making maple syrup. We took tons and tons of ideas and we kept cooking it down and cooking it down and cooking it down. And eventually we got to that nugget of the idea, which was Life Ready Academic Plan. What we knew, we hit it when we started seeing people using that term in their common language, right? So when the upper school was involved in taking a 2-year study to rebuild the upper school schedule, you'd hear upper school faculty members on their own saying, we need a life-ready schedule, right? When the dance teacher talked about how she empowered different students to choreograph different dances, she's standing on the stage and she says, you know what, we're trying to have a life-ready dance program, and to do that, I've empowered kids to choreograph the dances, right? When you hear that kind of stuff, you're like, this thing is out there, right? It's sticky. And so then we knew we had enough to really get serious about it. Now if you go to McDonough's website, McDonough doesn't have a U, just McDonogh. You'll see on the front page, it just, bam, life ready, right? That school now, that is their base camp. And now they're living into it with a whole lot of action, okay? Great. Other questions, anyone? So, yes, Myron.
One of the things that strikes me as a challenge is just the current climate that we're living in nationally. And it seems to me as if a lot of us ecumenically are just tired.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of uncertainty swirling around. There's anger on all sides. We're fraught. We're afraid. What would you recommend to settle the conversation so that it could be productive in the path going forward?
That's a great question. I think if we open that up here, there'd be some really good insights from other people in this room to that question. The first thought that I have is to give a place for that for people to talk to each other within the community would be number one, to create the space for communication and conversation. And then the piece also for me that's so powerful about the summit and the notion of a vision and the base camp clarity is it in the midst of all that chaos that we become to understand who we are and what we do. And what I think that does is it grounds people in a community, and I think it's extremely powerful, and I think we've never needed it more, right? That inspirational, common goal, common vision, and common values, I think is incredibly important for our schools. And so I think now's the time more than any to do this, although it is hard because the headwinds are strong, right? But I believe it's work worth doing because if people have that clarity, they're going to know why they belong to something. So that's my sort of quick answer. So I just thank you all for this work is constantly in motion for us. We're always developing it. We're trying new things. The work that our team is doing for members of NAIS is we're in this strategy lab thing and we're inventing. So what we're doing is we're taking this, we're turning it into a workshop. Not only this, there's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't talk about, but we're creating this workshop approach. And then we're also starting to develop tools that schools can use on their own because, to take this back into your own community is a little hard, right? And so we're trying to create tools that members can use to say, we're going to use this now, we're going to do this in our school, and I've got stuff to help me to do that. And so this, for me, this is about prototyping and learning constantly. It's constantly in evolution. And I'm always engaged with schools to try to make this resonate more and make it better and make it more truthful. But I wouldn't say for a minute it's done or that it's perfect or that any of these ideas I'm like completely married to. This is really just based in my experience over a few years. So I just want to thank you. I hope you have a wonderful conference, and I'll be around for a couple minutes after if anybody wants to chat. So thanks.